Welcome to the Pragmatic Hero's Journey, a monthly podcast about becoming a pragmatic author, hosted by Tammy Corin and Tim Mitra. On this episode, Tammy and Tim talk with Sophie DeBenedetto about her journey to becoming a pragmatic author. This episode was recorded on April 14, 2021. The Pragmatic Hero's Journey is owned and operated by the Pragmatic Programmers LLC, home of the Pragmatic Bookshelf. Founded by Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas, the Pragmatic Programmers has one simple goal: to improve the lives of professional developers.
Tim, I want you to kick off the show because I always kick off the show.
So I'll kick it off this time. So hi, Sophie. Welcome to the show. And just so you know, Tammy's really lazy and doesn't like to do introductions. So she'd like to ask you, and I'm asking on her behalf, can you tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, hey, my name is Sophie, and day job right now working as an engineer at GitHub. And how I got connected to Tammy and you all is that I'm also a Prog author. And first book that I've ever written, co-authored with Bruce Tate, called Programming Live View, is out in beta now.
Yeah, that's a pretty big step. I mean, going from not having a book to being in beta, like how was that when your editor came back to you and said, okay, we're going into beta? Like, what was that feeling like?
It's interesting because I felt like it was done, and it was totally not done, of course. So beta, for listeners who aren't super familiar, doesn't mean that you're even done writing all of the chapters of the book. It just means that there are enough chapters completed that you can publish what you have so far and make it available online. And as you finish up the remaining chapters, we'll release new versions. And then when it's sort of done, all the chapters are done, it'll go out into print and be available elsewhere. So even though I knew, of course, that like beta wasn't done, I even still have 3 chapters to go. I just felt like, that's it. I'm out. It's out into the world. Like I get to feel like I can wash my hands of this, not that I was dying to do so. And so then going from that to trying to get back into the swing of writing actually felt kind of challenging. And just in the past week or so, I feel like I'm back into the groove and, really enjoying writing again. But I did have this moment where I felt like, aha, that's that. Oh, wait, no, there's still a lot more work to do.
And how did you even get approached to write this book? Did it just like fall into your lap, or did you put the word out that you were interested in doing something like this? Like, I'm trying to figure out what your journey was. I'm going to say the name of the show, to becoming a pragmatic author. Like, what was that journey for you? Where did you start? How'd you get here?
It's really interesting because I have always loved writing. So I didn't study computer science in college. I have a liberal arts degree. And so I did a lot of writing as a student in college. And when I graduated from school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself and with my liberal arts degree. I did a lot of different things. I was a nanny. I did a lot of standardized test prep tutoring and kind of floated around for a little while. And when I found my way to programming, one of the things that I really started to enjoy doing was just blogging about what I was learning. And it wasn't that I was writing blog posts that were particularly like revelatory, nothing brand new and groundbreaking, but it just felt like a really satisfying process to me to sort of put 2 and 2 together, have a breakthrough, whether it was how to build a nested hash in Ruby, something kind of basic, or something more advanced. As I progressed a little bit in my career, I just enjoyed writing about what I was doing on my blog. And that just kind of naturally grew over the years into a couple of like conference speaking opportunities that I applied for. And I sort of came to know Bruce Tate, my co-author, like somewhat tangentially just through other folks in the Elixir community. I've been writing Elixir for a while and blogging about it, writing about it, presenting, talking about it. And when I got a chance to really meet and talk to Bruce, we just really hit it off. He's an educator, runs Graxio platform, and I taught programming for a couple years when I finished up my own bootcamp program as a student. And so, we had a lot in common. We had a couple great conversations, and then we didn't really talk for a while. And I think what happened is that Bruce started writing this book and realized that, it's a lot of work, as he knew, because he's written many books before, but also had lots of other projects that he wanted to be working on, and started looking around for a co-author, thought of me and reached out to me. So I sort of feel like, yes, it was passive in that I didn't apply or submit a proposal, which, like, PSA, anyone listening can go to PragProg's website and click that become an author link and submit proposals and pre-proposals. But I do feel like it kind of grew out of the work I had been doing for years, just to do my own writing on my own blog and to engage, with the community and conferences, do mentoring. So um, a little bit like felt out of the blue, a little bit felt like a natural progression of what I was doing. But it is sort of weird to me that as much as I had loved writing and done a lot of it for myself over the years, it didn't really occur to me that I could write a book, and that like you didn't have to have some sort of special magic powers to be someone that can author. So I would encourage anyone out there to kind of go check out the Become an Author page, or just think about how to get into doing any kind of your own writing, because really anyone can do it.
So I want to circle back to the question that comes to me, which is, so how did you end up, through your earlier experiences, how did you end up wanting to be a programmer? Why did you choose that path?
That's a great question. Sometimes I feel like I don't know. So I never thought that I could do this work. I never thought that it was going to be for me. Growing up, I was terrible at math and science. I really struggled in those subjects in school. For a minute, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and I was like on the pre-med track in college. And then I took I like scraped through the first math requirement, and then I got to the second one, which I don't even remember what it was. It was calculus or something like that. And I was just like, oh, turns out I can't do this. Guess I'm not going to be a doctor. So for many years, I sort of just thought, all right, my computer is a magic box for watching Netflix on, and that's kind of it. But after I graduated school, I just didn't really know where I wanted to end up. For a little while, I thought I would go to law school. I actually applied and got in, and sort of pulled out at the very last minute, luckily realizing in time that it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. But also around this time, I was volunteering at a nonprofit in New York. And I think as kind of like one of the younger people involved, I was tasked with working on some websites for this organization. And so I started working a bit with WordPress, dabbling in HTML, and just getting really frustrated with WordPress. It's probably improved a lot since those days, but I just remember sort of being up at like midnight trying to figure out, why something wasn't working in WordPress. And then I even got on the phone with WordPress support, which I don't even know if that still exists. Like you could call WordPress on the phone. And eventually the answer was unplug your router and plug it back in, and it worked. So it was like a caching problem at the level of my router. Yeah, exactly. Not even browser cache. This guy was like, unplug your router and plug it back in, and that did it. And that was sort of like this epiphany for me. Like, I've got to know more about what this is. I need to know what's going on here. It kind of sparked my interest a little bit. I did a couple online courses, and by the time I went to a bootcamp, the Flatiron School. By the time I got into that program and started showing up as a student and was writing code every day, I just kind of fell in love with it, sort of got obsessed. I'm sure that might feel familiar to some people. It really just captured my imagination.
Yeah, we've all banged our heads against our computer terminals from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
I do want to sort of dig into the bootcamp thing. I taught at a bootcamp for a little while for iOS, and I'm just curious, can you just sort of give us a bit of experience about that? And how did you find the bootcamp at the Flatiron that you mentioned?
Yeah, I had a really great experience. So this was going back, what year is it? What is time? 6 years, I think, maybe 7 years. And I actually found out about it through a good friend of mine who I'd known for years, who had gone through the program like a year before me. And that was also something that really opened my eyes to what was possible for me, because she and I had gone to school together, also studied liberal arts. And sort of seeing this good friend of mine go through this experience made me realize that there's no reason why I can't do this, right? This story that I'd been telling myself, like, oh, I'm someone that can't figure out computers, like, is BS, frankly. So that's how I found out about the Flatiron School. And at the time that I was a student there, it was still pretty early days for that program. So there was just the one campus in downtown Manhattan, not a ton of students, but a lot of great teachers. It was a fantastic community. And it was a really rigorous program, and it definitely still is, I would say. You were there every day, all day, 9 to 5 or whatever, as late as you wanted to be there, working, learning, studying, building out projects. And it was a 3-month program. And the idea was at the end of it, they had sort of a career services department that was going to work with you to get you a job. But what I ended up doing when I graduated was starting to work at Flatiron. So I worked as a curriculum writer and a teacher for a couple of years there before moving on to other things. And I mean, honestly, those are like some of the best experiences of my life, I have to say. My time as a student there, being a part of that community, my time as a teacher there, sort of giving back to this next wave of students. I'm still very close with a lot of the people that I worked with there, or that I learned with there. And I definitely recommend it to anyone who asks.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned Elixir, and I gotta admit, I'm a PHP WordPress guy from way back, and I've been doing
Mhm.
iOS for the last 10 years, but I don't know what Elixir is. So can you tell me?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a functional programming language that runs on the Beam, Erlang's VM, and a lot of people kind of describe it as like Erlang's Ruby. So it's very eloquent and it's very kind of user friendly and reader friendly. And a lot of the people that initially created it were sort of coming from the Ruby community. And they brought with them a lot of the things that are great about Ruby, right? How eloquent and readable it is. Also, a lot of the community features of Ruby, right? How supportive it is, how open it is to beginners. But these folks, Jose William in particular, were looking for the concurrency and fault tolerance that something like Erlang or languages that run on the Beam can give you. That frankly just wasn't there, and Ruby wasn't there at the time. Although Ruby has a new concurrency model that's starting to get off the ground that's inspired by the actor model, which of course comes from Erlang. So I'm definitely interested to see how that goes. So when I first learned about Ruby, it was actually through a friend of mine who his MO is to sort of like learn something new, get really excited, and then want to get other people excited about it too. So he got kind of hooked on Elixir, started talking about it to me and some other people. And at the time, I was still pretty early on in my own programming journey. I think I was working as a teacher at the time, so I hadn't even had a full-time engineering job yet. So some of the things about Elixir that I think will make it really appealing to businesses, like how well it scales, the kind of observability that you get, developer tooling, of course, it's concurrency and fault tolerance that the Beam gives it. That wasn't really what drew me to it because I didn't really have those kinds of problems to solve yet. But there were so many language features about it that made it just easy to learn and kind of a pleasure to work with, like pattern matching, the ability to make these really beautiful and neat functional pipes of pure single purpose reducers, the patterns you could apply, how composable it is. All of these things really kind of caught my imagination as somebody that was kind of still a beginner programmer.
So you talked about how you were first a student and then you became a teacher at the Flatiron, and then you learned about Elixir and all these other things. I wonder if that first teaching experience, well, first I got to ask, that first teaching experience, was that before or after you were doing the nanny stuff?
Oh, great question. So I was a nanny before I started as a student at the Flatiron School. But at that same time, I was also doing standardized test prep and tutoring. So I was teaching in a classroom setting the LSAT exam, which is the law school admissions test. And basically, I took that test, decided not to go to law school, but figured, okay, at least maybe I can get a job tutoring it. So I had some experience, like I said, in a classroom setting, teaching and tutoring. And that definitely helped me see that it was something that I wanted to do with my newfound programming knowledge. Like I loved teaching, I loved being in the classroom, I loved helping students learn and kind of connect what they were struggling with. But I didn't want to tutor the LSAT forever because it's a standardized test. And once you've taken it 60 times, which you do as an instructor, like there's not a lot left to really explore. So the role teaching the programming bootcamp that I had graduated from, really, it just felt like such a perfect entrance into this technology sphere for me.
And you think that maybe that teaching experience sort of led you into not only learning about the language, but teaching others about what you've learned? Is it sort of like an inner itch that you have to scratch, like, oh, I've learned this thing, now I want to go teach other people? Because it sounds like that's sort of what happened when you were a student. You were like, oh, this is really cool stuff. Hey, I could teach other people how to do this.
Yeah, and that's like exactly what inspired me to write and what still keeps me writing today, whether it's, my personal technical blog or the book that I'm working on for Prag. It almost, the way I kind of describe it, it sort of feels like a victory lap, which I hope doesn't sound like, I don't know, bad or anything. But when you figure something out, taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and being able to explain that to someone else, whether it's in writing or you're just talking to the person who happens to be sitting next to you, it's just such a good feeling. Like you're really kind of cementing what you've learned, you're putting it back out into the world, and it just helps you really recognize that you've accomplished something, which you have. It's very hard to figure out a lot of engineering problems, and solving them is no small thing. So taking a moment to frankly brag about it by telling someone else what you learned is, I think it's a great thing.
So when you approach the writing that you do, whether it be a blog post or, a full-length book at this point, where do you start? Do you think about the tech that you want to learn and then learn it and then teach it, or have you learned it and then you're like, oh, now I want to teach it? And when you're ready to do that teaching part, where do you start? Do you start with the physical code and the project itself, or do you start with the writing and the outline? Like, what is your process for all of that?
Yeah, so it's definitely different for everyone. For me, I usually start with there's something I want to learn or something I want to build. So I very rarely start with, I want to teach this thing, let me go off and learn it. It's more like, I have learned this thing and now I want to teach it. So I'll usually start with there's a topic I'm interested in, or a technology or a library that I want to check out. And sometimes that happens in my day job, in my professional life. I'll solve an interesting problem, or I'll learn something new about a new language or framework, as part of my actual job. And then I'll go off and write something about it because I feel excited about what I've learned. But if it's not something that I'm working on, professionally, then it might be something that I'll start a side project, or just like a little mini example app or bit of code to kind of dig into the concept or demonstrate what I'm trying to understand. And then once I've understood it, and once I sort of have that aha moment, that's when I feel inspired to write. So I usually start then with the code, or the code is finished and it's what inspires me to write something. And then I'll kind of sit down and start to write out what I've learned.
Do you put together an outline first, or you sort of just jump into it?
No, I usually put together an outline of the story that I want to tell. I think this is relevant right to the title of this podcast, which is The Hero's Journey. I tend to approach my writing, whether it's for a book or for a blog post, or even for like a technical talk, conference talk, meetup talk, whatever. I'll approach it as a story that I want to tell. And I am sort of the hero in that journey, right? If you're talking about like that narrative arc of like, you started with a problem and you didn't know anything, and you started knowing more and more, and then you kind of get to the pinnacle of it, and then you wrap it up. It kind of comes naturally to me to write that way, because really what I'm just writing about is my own experience. And I think that that's how so many people learn.
How do you find the time to learn all this cool stuff, teach all these wonderful things? And then you mentioned, well, when I'm not at my day job. So how do you put all of that together? Like, clearly you have a day job, but you're also writing a book, you're writing these blog posts. Presumably you're still out there learning new things. How do you fit it all into your day? Like, what does a typical Sophie day look like?
It helps that I like to wake up really early. I used to wake up at 5:30, and I had like all these amazing morning hours to get extra stuff done in, but lately it's been more like 6 or 7. But I think for me it is a challenge not to oversubscribe myself. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. It feels great to say yes to everything, especially when those are things that you're interested in, or that are going to help and support other people. But I'm not going to lie, there were points while writing this book that I felt overwhelmed or stretched too thin. And I think that's when it's important to take a step back and figure out what you can take off your plate. But I think one thing that really helps is the things that I say yes to, and the things that I spend my time on are things that actually energize me. So like, yes, it takes time to participate in a mentoring group or work on this book, but I enjoy that work so much, and I get so much out of it personally that it's not a drag to do that. Like, these are my hobbies.
You also have a podcast too, do you not?
Yes, I do. And I certainly would love for any of your listeners to check it out. It's called Beam Radio. You can find us online at beamrad.io. So BEAMRAD.io. And it's a podcast about all things Beam. So Elixir, Erlang, and more. And it's got a fabulous panel of hosts. It's me, my co-author, Bruce Tate, and a couple of other wonderful Elixir devs. We've got Alex Koutmos, Lars Vickman, and Steven Nunez, who is actually the reason why I even learned Elixir in the first place. So it's been such a pleasure to get to collaborate with him on this.
And I have to ask, writing tools. Now, it varies for different people how they write when they sit down and write. But yes, the Pragmatic programmers, we have a set of tools, a standard tool set that we use. But not all of our authors write with the same tools. Some use this text editor, some use that text editor. I gotta know. And Tim's going to kill me because I'm sort of jumping the gun on this. What do you use?
I'm kind of easy. Like, any markdown file is where I'm perfectly happy. So I'll usually just open up whatever text editor I happen to be using or into. Like, I use VS Code a lot at work because we use Golang. So I'll just open up a markdown file and just kind of get to it. I don't have a lot of special preferences when it comes to tooling.
And you mentioned the hero's journey before, about setting out this journey that the reader can go through and follow these steps, and you'll conquer the dragon at the end. How do you weave that into a technical story? Because a lot of people find that concept a little confusing. Quite honestly, when I first started with the Pragmatic Bookshelf, I too was confused. I was like, what do you mean a hero's journey? I have to tell a story. What? I don't understand. How do you do that?
So I think this is something that I definitely learned as a teacher, and especially during my time at the Flatiron School. And I think the trick to it is your job is actually to let the reader or the student get lost and confused. What you want to do is draw them into a problem that will frankly stump them, and then start giving them bit by bit the tools that they need to build the solution. So one thing that I like to do is, in my writing or in my lectures, basically draw a student into a point where we basically hit a dead end. Like, oh no, but how are we going to do X, Y, and Z? Like, the code we built so far only got us this far. Now we're totally stuck. And then I like to set the stage with, if only there was some way we could, frankly, solve this problem. And that's when you kind of swoop in with the new technology or the learning goal or the answer. The answer is TurboLinks or Ajax or LiveView, or this particular framework, or this piece of the framework that we're focusing on now.
What is the experience that you've had with working with a co-author? Because presumably your blog posts are just you sit down at the computer, you write what you're thinking, you're doing what you're wanting to do, you're writing about the things you know, and now you've been thrown in with a co-author. You have an editor, you've got a publisher. Like, how is that working into your plan of going out there and teaching people?
Yeah, I mean, it's much more straightforward when you're on your own, right? Because you basically get to do whatever you want, and the only restrictions are the restrictions that you place on yourself, and whatever you personally feel that what you've produced is good enough, you get to be done. And that's certainly not the case when you're working with a co-author or working with an editor. And frankly, it's been awesome. I've been learning so much from Bruce and from our editor, Jackie Carter, who is absolutely so talented. Every time I talk to her, I just feel myself becoming a better writer. So I can kind of get into a little bit of the co-authoring process that Bruce and I have been using. So it's not like we're both writing the same thing at the same time. For most of the book, we've set it up so that I'm writing the code for the chapter, and then the outline of how we want the chapter to flow and how we want the student or the reader, to build out the code for that chapter. And then I'll sort of hand it over to him, and he'll fill it in and write all the prose and kind of keep the style consistent and make sure that the themes and the messages that we want drawn out are present there and clear. And then we'll work on it a little bit more. Maybe I'll take a pass at editing it, offer some feedback, whatever, before we hand it over to our author. And we've just flipped those roles, though. For the first time ever in my experience, Bruce is writing the code and the outline, and I'm writing the prose. And that's been really eye-opening as well. But it's been working out super well, because I think Bruce errs a little bit more on the side of, like, I want to tell the story in a way that's compelling and that makes sense for the reader at this point in time. And I think maybe because I'm newer to this, I'm a little bit more cautious. I'm like, well, it has to be super clear. Like, there can be no room for confusion. We have to be as explicit and detailed as possible. And sometimes he kind of pulls me back from that and says, like, we can gloss over this a little bit for now. We can let the reader struggle a little. And then sometimes I feel like he's glossed over it too much, and I'll bring in some more detail. So I feel like our writing styles balance each other out really well. The way we've sort of been splitting up responsibilities and trading off has worked out well. And then the process of handing stuff over to our editor and getting her feedback has been very rigorous. So that's, I've never done that before. I've never had anybody else edit my content other than maybe a friend reading my blog post and, pointing out a bunch of typos or something. And the first time she gave me any feedback, I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh no. Does Jackie hate me? Am I bad at this? But, after speaking with her, I realized, of course, that's not the case. And, she just had all of this feedback that was so sharp and so insightful, and really helped me become a sharper writer, become a clearer writer. And, like I said, every time I talk to her for even just a couple minutes, I'm learning something about how to do this better.
So how did you decide which dragons you're going to slay? Like, how did you decide what the problem was going to be that you're going to try and solve, or sort of lead the reader through it to solve?
It's really about what it is that you want to teach them and what problem that technology or solution is designed to solve. That's kind of how I'll come across, like, what problem to present the reader with.
So how did the whole Programming Phoenix Live View, where did that idea come from? Was it just like, hey, let's write a book about this, or
We got kind of lucky because this topic was sort of, I don't want to say it was handed to us specifically on a silver platter, but it was waiting out there on a silver platter for someone to take. So LiveView is a new library for the Phoenix Web Development Framework. Phoenix Web Development Framework is like Elixir's web development framework. And there's already a Programming Phoenix LiveView, or excuse me, a Programming Phoenix book by Chris McCord, who's one of the co-creators of Phoenix, and I believe Jose Valim, one of the co-creators of Elixir, but I apologize in advance to listeners if I'm getting that list of authors wrong. So there's already a Programming Phoenix, which is kind of the definitive manual for building a Phoenix web app. But LiveView came out over the course of the past year, and it really changed everything. There's no reason to build a Phoenix app that doesn't have LiveView and that doesn't use this, frankly, incredible technology for building single page apps. So there was really this need for a book that would be the definitive manual to the new way to program Phoenix, which is to program Phoenix LiveView. So we were able, lucky enough, I guess, to be positioned to step in and take that on.
So for the people who don't know, I mean, I don't know much about Phoenix. So what is the benefit of LiveView? I watched one of your talks earlier today, so I have a general idea.
Very cool. Yeah, so LiveView is a web development framework that basically allows you to build a single page app by writing almost purely server-side code. So all of the JavaScript is abstracted away into the framework. What it really does under the hood is it opens a persistent WebSocket connection between the client and the server, and it has a pretty sophisticated diffing engine so that as long as you update your state appropriately on the server side, the DOM is just going to update like just the teeny tiny part of it that needs to change based on whatever you've changed server side. So it allows you to manage state purely on the server side. It makes testing really easy because testing can happen in pure Elixir. You don't have these complicated interaction points or contracts between your client and your server anymore. And it does pretty much everything you need a single page app to do. You've got multi-part form uploads. You've got, your complex state management system, all the interactivity you could possibly want. You've also got distributed real-time updates for free because it's built in Phoenix on top of Phoenix's pub sub server. So you can broadcast and receive messages and update your own UI based on events that are happening wherever in your distributed system. And all of that stuff comes to you right out of the box. So it's a pretty powerful tool that I'm pretty excited about.
Tim asked you about the book, and he sort of did that side shuffle where he mentioned that he was watching your talks today, and that reminded me. I'm like, oh, right, we didn't even talk about you getting up there and giving these talks. Like, it's it's sort of like an extension, right, of writing and teaching people, but it's also kind of terrifying getting up in front of talking to people. Were you always just a natural at it? Are you fearful of it? I'm curious as to like where that plays in those conference talks and I guess with you having a podcast, you might be a little bit more natural than some others. But do you find that as rewarding or as fulfilling as writing, or like where do you sit there in your mind with these conference talks? I mean, granted, no one's allowed to go to conferences anymore right now,
Sure.
but we still do Zoom conferences.
There's a couple virtual ones out there, yeah.
And they're good.
So,
they do their thing.
Oh, I think they are, yeah. So I would say that being a teacher absolutely beat any anxiety out of me when it comes to like getting up in front of a room full of people and trying to tell them a thing. Because you're not going to get a more critical audience than a room full of people that are stressed out because they spent a bunch of money and quit their jobs so that they can take whatever is about to come out of your mouth and turn it into a new job and a new life for themselves. That's a lot of pressure. And one thing that I learned in that role is that it's not necessary or helpful for you to be right all the time and have all the answers. So as a teacher, it is so valuable to show when you don't know the answer to something, to show when you're out of your depth, and to really let students in on what that struggle and that journey is like for you. So one thing that I learned how to do as a teacher when asked a question that I didn't know the answer to was say, I don't know. And here's how I would go about figuring out, the answer to this question. And that's what we're going to do now. So you can't quite do that in your conference talk. If you really don't know what you're talking about, you probably shouldn't be up there, but it definitely helped me grow out of this initial anxiety of like, can I go up there? What if I don't know what I'm talking about? What if I do get asked a question that I don't know the answer to? I've been asked so many questions that I don't know the answer to, certainly as a teacher and also as a conference speaker. Absolutely, somebody's going to ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, and it's totally fine to say that you don't know, that you'd love to find out, or connect with this person later. So definitely helped me in some of my first conference talks, but you better believe I was so nervous in my first talk. I've to this day never watched it, and I'm sure I never will. I feel like I was probably up there shaking, and I don't think anyone noticed, but you never know. But yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy it. One of the things that I really like to do, and this is going to sound extremely weird, is make slide decks. It's actually like a hobby of mine. I have a slide deck on skincare because I really love skincare and I have a lot of opinions about it. So I have like a 40 slide deck about like, how to take good care of your skin. And these are some of the things you can do. This will have been our second COVID year of Passover. So I have a Zoom Seder slide deck that I created with my partner, who's an illustrator, and she did all these amazing drawings for it. So I do find it really fun and enjoyable and rewarding to make slide decks. And that's what you get to do for conference talks. So I think it's fun to prepare for them. I find it challenging to give them. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't, but also going to these conferences and getting out there and speaking has really opened up my own network within this community. And it's led me to really meet and learn from a lot of wonderful people around the world. And that's something that wouldn't have happened if I had stayed home.
All right. So two things. First of all, I don't think that's weird at all because I also love making slide decks.
It's so
and in
fun.
fact, whenever I've had to give a talk or anything like that, I've always started with the slide decks and I've let the slide decks lead my conversation. And it's gotten to the point now where I don't even write down what I'm going to say. I just make a slide deck. I don't. I just go up there and I just look at my slide deck. I'm like, yep, that's right. And
yeah, that's wonderful.
And the second thing is, I want to sort of go back to the beginning of the show where you said, oh, I had this story in my head where I couldn't do it. And I was like, that's stupid. I'm just going to go do it. Of course I can do it. And I want to have you speak to that point and like, I don't know, maybe ring the bell and let people know that they can totally do anything that they want to do.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, I look back and I sort of, I'm not resentful, I'm not angry at myself, but I really look back and I do sort of shake my head at how I felt that way. It really changed my life, start learning these things and just enjoying it and just to really have this shocking revelation that it wasn't true. This thing I had told myself for basically my entire life, ever since I was like a little kid, and the math ladies came to our second grade classroom with these little magnet shapes and tried to teach us second grade geometry or whatever. And I was like completely lost and had no clue what was going on all the way up until I was, ready to start taking some of this stuff on as an adult. I had always convinced myself that this just wasn't for me. I would joke about it all the time. It really became like part of my personality, at least my internal sort of story of what my personality was. And it wasn't true. It was only true because I told myself it was true at that time. And having that experience of having this kind of story of myself disproven, I think has really helped me so much in the years since then. It's why I felt like I could go out there and start writing my technical blog, right? And some of the things that I'll hear students say when I require and or encourage them to write blog posts is, well, I don't have anything to write about. I don't have anything new to write about. Nobody wants to hear what I'm learning. And that was a hang up that I kind of didn't have at the time because I had basically just had my mind blown about how it wasn't true, that I wasn't good enough to do this. And I think similarly, that is something that helped me to feel like I could go out and apply to conferences and give talks, even though I had never done it before. I could try for, a more challenging engineering role than I had undertaken before. Just because I haven't done it yet doesn't mean I can't do it. It just kind of took the fear out of it a little bit, and it's not completely gone. Like, of course, everybody has anxieties, but once I kind of took that fear out of it, it really helped me to open so many doors for myself. And it's a shame because I do really see so many people, so many learners just tell themselves that they can't do this thing, right? Maybe it's not learning programming in general, but it might be going for a certain job, or something that's been a recurring theme in my life lately is people feeling like they can't negotiate their job offers. No, that's garbage. You can do anything.
So we have this section of the podcast where we like to ask questions. We used to have this thing called the chaos questions, but they're not quite as chaotic. They're a little disjointed because we're just working on them. So if you're okay with that, we'll just jump in and ask some pointed questions, and you can answer as long or short as you like. All right. So we just literally rewrote this question before the show. Who or what is your biggest influence?
Who or what is my biggest influence? That's a really hard question. Oh my gosh. I would say that one of my biggest influences as an engineer is a friend of mine who I actually mentioned earlier on, the reason that I kind of started programming Elixir, Stephen Nunez. We first kind of got to know each other when we were both teaching at the Flatiron School. And at that time, I was actually kind of terrified of him because he does this thing that I think he thinks it's putting you at ease. He does it with students too. If you ask him a question, you've made a mistake, your code's not working, and he goes, oh no, oh God, what's going on here? And I think he's trying to tell you like, oh, it's not that big a deal. Like we're laughing about it. But at the time I didn't know him. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I've, created a huge mess for this person to untangle. But anyway, I think something that I really learned from Stephen is just this love of learning and this joy in sharing that with other people, right? This desire to turn around as soon as you've kind of put the pieces of something together and give that to someone else. And that's something that I hope we give to our students. And that has really inspired me over the years to write, to teach, and to just keep learning.
So you kind of answered this question earlier, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I ruined it.
Yeah. Who ruined it? She ruined it? Okay.
I ruined it.
You did? Okay. What is your favorite text editor or IDE and why?
Yeah, I'm definitely not one of these people that is like, ready to go to battle for my text editor or tooling. I've been using VS Code lately. It's fine. I don't know. I used to use Atom. It was also fine. I feel like I should learn Vim. Maybe I'll get around to it one day.
Wait a second. You're not ready to go to battle for your text editor? I think this podcast is over.
I know. On. I mean, people take it so seriously,
yeah.
But I just kind of feel like it's about finding the best tool for the job.
So I do have a question about VS Code because I'm actually helping a friend of mine with her website. And so I was down this other route. I call it yak shaving when you have to go learn something just to do some simple problem. Anyway, but the tooling or the lessons I'm doing are in VS Code. So I've never actually cranked it open because I work in Xcode because I'm an iOS developer. But so what do you like about VS Code? What do you don't like about it? Have you found it easy to use?
Yeah, I definitely find it easy to use. It's not the only text editor that has great Golang support. Like JetBrains is, I think, sort of the go-to powerhouse for Golang programming, but it's got all the Go plugins. You can do the thing where you click the little link above your individual test and run it in the terminal that pops up. Although I'll tell you what I'm the most excited about these days. So I give a workshop at CodeBeam US, Stephen and I, and it just so happened that there was a student in the workshop that had the most beautiful theme for their text editor that I had ever seen. It's like shades of purple, some of it, but not too much of it glows. Like if you open a window in the text editor, there's like a very faint purple glow around the window. And it really just got me excited to wake up every day and open my text editor just to look at this gorgeous theme. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of it, but that's what I'll go to battle for. A pleasing theme for whatever text editor you choose.
No, that's important, right? You have to have a nice theme. You really do, because programmers, we stare at things all day, every day, and it can really wear you out if you're not, if you don't have a pretty theme to look at, honestly. And I want to steal that theme, so please go find out what it is.
I know, I'm looking for it now, but I can't find it. You're talking about
the purple glowy, and I'm like, oh, that sounds beautiful.
Just Google it.
I know. I'll find it and I'm going to email it to you. I think you're going to love it.
I would absolutely love it.
All right. In the meantime, if you could choose another profession, what would it be?
I get this question sometimes and I feel like I don't know. I mean, I love teaching. And so I think whatever other profession I would choose or end up in, there's going to end up being a teaching component in it. So I do love to bake and cook. So maybe in another life, like I have a baking business or a cooking business, but probably that would just turn into like a YouTube channel where I teach people how to bake, which is probably not a very lucrative career, but it would be fun.
Actually, I think you're wrong about that. You should look into that one.
That's true. Yeah. If you get the right sponsors.
Dump the code and pick up some baking.
Become a wildly famous baking YouTuber.
Get those YouTube dollars going.
Mm-hmm.
You like to work alone or with a team?
I do not like to work alone. In fact, I sort of hate it and it freaks me out. I really like to collaborate with others, even when you're just thinking out loud and talking out loud. And some of the best times I've had professionally has been working on like a small team of people that knew each other pretty well. And we just had a ton of fun solving problems together. And I think one of the things that I love about programming is how collaborative and frankly social it is. I think that's kind of what makes it fun.
Wait a second. What? Programming's collaborative and social? I think I'm
I
doing it
totally
wrong.
think so. Yeah, I mean, first of all, to each their own, right? Like if you don't enjoy those aspects of it, then you absolutely can do whatever you want to do by yourself. And there's plenty of, you know, companies and teams that will accommodate that. But I think that I think finding the best answer to particular problems, to building frameworks that work, that are robust, and that are beautiful, I think that comes from collaboration, and that comes from a diversity of minds kind of coming to bear on a single problem. And I really enjoy that part of it.
All right, Tim. No. Don't go to the next
I was
question.
going to ask a follow-up question.
Oh,
That's
I
okay.
was too, but you go ahead because you're way
Well,
cooler than me.
So, well, my follow-up question was going to be, so we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, so we're all obviously working from home, right? But do you at GitHub, do you normally have an office, or is it all remote kind of thing?
Yeah, so I kind of looked out. I started at GitHub like a month or two before the pandemic hit, and GitHub is a fully remote, globally distributed company. So I kind of had my rocky transition to working at home, you know, nominally by myself. I could collaborate with my team members, but I'm physically at home alone. I got to have that transition like a month or two before the rest of the world, and I got to learn from an organization that had been doing this for years. And it was still tough. I think one of the things that I thought when I started this move to a remote team was that it would sort of just replace my usual in-person interactions with virtual interactions. So I thought, okay, we're not going to be in the conference room, we're going to be on Zoom. Or I'm not going to tap the person sitting next to me if I have a question, but I'll just, you know, ping them on Slack. And of course, those things happen. You know, you have meetings, you talk in Slack, you pair program, et cetera. But what really took me by surprise and took me a while to adjust to was not the remote nature of the work, but the asynchronous nature of the work. Because my team in particular, you know, half of us are in India, some of us are in the US, a bunch of other people are on the West Coast in Canada, not a ton of overlap. So what collaboration looks like, it starts to look really different than what I thought it would be.
Right. Yeah. I have a few friends in Canada here who work at GitHub as well. Yeah. Where were we? Okay. Book or ebook?
I am never not reading something. I have to be reading something at all times. And it's frankly impractical to do it in any other way than on Kindle. So I'm going to go ebook.
All right. Form or function?
Oh my gosh. I think if the function is right, the form is going to follow.
Okay.
So I guess function.
Okay. Pen or pencil?
Pen, definitely pen. Actually, I have a great pen that I love. I was going to hold it up and then I realized that the people listening to this podcast won't be able to see it, but it's called Lamy, Lamy. And I actually stole this from my partner who's like obsessed with pens because she's an illustrator and an animator. And I didn't know that this was like a thing. And then people on Zoom will call me out and say, oh my gosh, is that, you know, Lamy, those are great pens. And this is my favorite color, by the way, this like school bus yellow. So I'm very happy with this pen.
All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh my gosh, you guys are you're both gonna hate this answer. So I'll tell you what, I could never get into Star Trek, unfortunately, although I think I would like it if I tried now because growing up, my dad and my aunt were both obsessed with it. So to me, it seemed like uncool, right? Because my dad and my aunt were really into it. And unfortunately, although I love some of the older Star Wars, I could never really get into the new ones because I tried watching the first like wave of these newer ones that came out a few years ago, and I just felt like they weren't even trying anymore. Don't hate me. It was just like this thing exploded and now we're in a library, but the library is collapsing and you're just like, what is happening? So I've heard good things about the newer ones, and I really do like what's his name? He's bad and he's tall and he has a weird face.
Oh, Adam Driver?
Yeah, sign me up for Adam Driver. So I'm gonna give Star Wars another try.
All right.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I don't like the new Star Wars.
Okay,
she's talking about the Phantom Menace and
I can't watch it.
She's talking about the Phantom Menace, not the Force Awakens and the Jedi ones. Right?
They're all awful. If it's not the first three,
not really for me.
Yeah,
this
no.
This is a woman who just watched Firefly like a week
ago. Here we go. Listen, Sophie. You may not know the backstory, and I wouldn't be surprised I would actually be more surprised if you did know the backstory. But the backstory is that he brought me Firefly on DVD. Do you know Firefly?
I've never watched it, but it has a cult following.
No, you're missing a good one. And it took
I
me.
have heard that.
Let's see, what did it take me? He brought me the DVD in 2016. I just got done watching it 2 weeks ago, or
So you
3
loved
weeks.
it.
I
It
did
took you
love it.
5 years. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm telling you,
Yeah.
like, oh, you have to watch it. Totally got to watch it.
Yeah, I do
And
need
then you got to
something
watch
new
the
to watch,
movie
so.
Serenity, because that was also very good.
Yeah, I think I would watch those. But if I have to pick like my favorite old, not really old school, certainly, but years ago sci-fi that I will always rewatch, it's definitely Battlestar Galactica.
All right. Good call.
So
The-
good.
Not the first one, the second one, right?
No, yeah, the second one.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I guess, with all of these answers that you've given and taking into consideration that it wouldn't be cool if your aunt and uncle liked Star Trek, so I could see that, I guess we'll publish this episode.
I'm so relieved to hear that, Tammy.
Oh, well, listen, that brings us to the end of this episode, actually, which will get published. Yay. So I want to thank you for being on the show. I had a really good time, learning more about you and telling you that you should go out and watch Firefly. I mean, it was great. It was all good things. Before we wrap up, though, is there any way that our listeners can get in touch with you? Are you on Twitter? Like, where can they go to see what you're working on? I mean, obviously you're working on the book because,
Yeah.
you're back to it now, and hopefully you'll be working on more books going forward. But in the meantime, where can our
Do
listeners
we need
find
to
you?
plug the book, by the way? Just I'm curious.
We could totally plug.
I would love to plug the book. If you're giving me an opportunity to plug, I'm going to do it. So
Plug it all.
yeah, read our book, Programming Phoenix Live View, available in beta from Pragmatic Bookshelf. And I would love to hear from any listeners that want to chat or talk more. You can always reach me on Twitter. It's SM_DeBenedetto, which is my last name, which I'm sure will be in, the podcast title or show notes, whatever. And if you guys will permit me one additional plug, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, give her.
Awesome. Code Beam Europe is coming up at the end of May. It's going to be virtual, just like Code Beam America. I think we put on a great virtual conference. It feels the closest that I've experienced to like really being there with people. There's a lot of great social events and activities. One of the things that I really enjoy that we do is have talks and Q&As and discussions that are introduced and moderated by community members who are sort of like friends and colleagues of the person talking or giving a presentation. So you do really feel like you, the audience, are kind of included in kind of like a conversation among friends. And we get a lot of questions from our audience members, and it becomes like a really fun conversation. So definitely check that out if anybody is interested in hearing some awesome talks and discussions and Q&As on the Beam, on Erlang, on Elixir. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in those communities. So I would love to see some of your listeners there.
So Tim and I have been fighting over. This is what our fourth episode. No, this will be our fifth episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've been fighting over the outro script. Not actually fighting, but we've been fighting with the outro.
It's a
script.
one-sided fight, by the way.
It is a one-sided fight. The computer versus us. No.
You don't know. It's not fighting back.
Yeah. So I think I got it, Tim. I just edited it sort of quickly because I noticed that there was some really weird things in there. And I think you should give it a try because you keep saying, oh, I don't have a script. Now I gave it to you. Now it's like,
Oh, you think I should do the outro script?
You're so good at it. I mean, look how good you did the
Man.
intro. I bet you can do the outro just as well.
All right.
I mean,
since you-
I could
since you've updated
I could
I'll
send
do
it to Sophie and have her do
No,
it.
well-
Then she's going to charge me and it's going to be awful for me, not for her. She's going to do a great
Right.
outro, but it's going to cost me money.
Also, I'm very expensive.
Yeah,
Mhm.
she is because she's worth it, you see.
All right. Well, here goes. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Pragmatic Hero's Journey. You can find us on the web at pragprog.com. We're also on Twitter and Facebook as pragprog. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider writing a review in iTunes and share a link on social media. Go ahead. Let the world know we're out there. You can send us your feedback and guest requests to pragtalk@pragprog.com. And finally, if you like listening to the show and want to find out how you can help, please visit our website, pragprog.com, for details.
See that, Tim? Sophie, wasn't he fantastic?
Are you going to plug
It
this
really,
in?
you just flowed. You're a natural.
I'm gonna like clap. Can you hear me clapping? I'm
Yeah,
clapping.
Wait, there's like a little reaction clapping you can do in here. See, clapping.
Oh yeah, there is.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Mhm.
But that's neat. How did you do that?
The reactions button.
Next
What?
to record on the bottom there.
Oh, you guys know all the
New.
fancy stuff. Is it
What is
new?
it?
What can we say? Newish.
Oh, wait, I gotta try it. Wait, what can I do? I can laugh. Oh, I can
Yeah.
do all these things. Well, this is great. I loved it. Well, anyway, Sophie, I really did have a good time on the show.
Likewise.
Did you put that heart up there?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, wait, where's mine? Here we go. Okay.
There you go. Nice.
The heart gang.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm so glad that you took the time out to meet with us tonight, and I hope you had a good time. And we will, guess we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was a ton of fun. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you guys are great.
Thanks for listening to the Pragmatic Hero's Journey. We hope you enjoyed the show. For more information about the Pragmatic Hero's Journey, please visit pragprog.com or send an email to pragtalk@pragprog.org. Your hero's journey has just begun.